Hello, I apologize for being late. So, can I ask for approval of the minutes, please?
Motion made.
Second? In favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the committee work plan?
None.
Okay, I'll take that as a given. Okay, to Linda for commitments completions. Thanks.
So as I mentioned before, until we get an approved 10 to 14 capital program, we aren't putting out a new commitment report. But let me tell you a little bit about completions. We have completed year-to-date $676 million worth of work. That's against a goal of about $1.3 billion. The shortfall is largely due to a delay in some bus purchases. The major completion in April was some R160 cars that were delivered. And so that's the nice, short, sweet report.
Questions? Okay. As we put together the agenda for this meeting, I think the intent of this was actually to come back to some topics that I believe this committee has talked about over a period of time, our bus procurement program, our signals program, the way in which we're implementing new technology. And I think it's actually, from my perspective, another step forward, both in terms of what we're delivering and also about the way that we're actually looking and addressing some of the questions that have been on the table, both for this committee and I think for some other committees for some time. So I think really I'd like to use the time to allow us to get into that, to give people a sense of how we're approaching this. Obviously, complex questions, so not all of them without risks, but at least perhaps a different way of seeing how we're approaching some of this stuff right now, and also the fact that, knock on wood, some of it is beginning to appear. So, Joe, I think you're first, is that right? It's all yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. My presentation today will summarize our overall bus procurement strategy and the 2010 to 2014 bus procurement program for both New York City Transit and MTA Bus. Our decision-making process was, what we wanted to do was we did a cost-benefit analysis, and we did this back in January, and what we did with MTA staff and the independent engineer was, we looked at what's our best strategy, what kind of bus works well in what environment. And what we looked at was all different propulsion systems. We looked at hybrids, we looked at CNGs, we looked at diesels, we looked at turbines, and we looked at all different types of buses, from a 40-foot bus to an express bus to an articulated bus. And how many years do you keep a bus? You keep it 10 years, 12 years, 15 years. What's the right number? What kind of environmental impact does it have? And what kind of MDBF performance do we get out of it? Do you want me to hold off?
No.
Okay.
I think everybody's got hard copies.
Everybody's got hard copies? Okay.
Yes,
I'm on page 3.
Okay.
Is that a whiff? Is that a whiff? Yeah, okay.
That's a whiff.
That's a whiff. Okay. So we looked at our standard 40-foot bus, and what our analysis basically showed us is what type of bus should we buy. Well, we have a different duty cycle. Our duty cycles range greatly from a low speed, low ground speed, to a much higher ground speed in Long Island or in Staten Island. So what we recommended was that if we buy regular diesel buses, they're much cheaper than a hybrid bus. They're cheaper by about $170,000 a piece. And because fuel usage, if you look at the ground speeds, buses that are above 8 miles an hour, a regular diesel bus, it pays to operate that bus. In speeds, regular diesel and the speeds are above 8 miles an hour. In lower than 8 miles an hour, a hybrid works better. Hybrid gets better fuel economy, You don't tax the battery system that often. So what our analysis showed us is that diesel buses are less expensive, as we know, to operate than hybrids, and diesel fuel economy and emissions profile are very, very similar to hybrid buses on high mileage and high-speed routes. Hybrids are more fuel efficient like I said before, in really traffic congested areas. So since our emissions, CO2 emissions, is a function of fuel economy. The more fuel you use, the more your CO2 emissions are. So, and diesel buses virtually have the same emissions profiles as hybrids on these routes. They're virtually the same. But hybrids are much more effective when the average speed is 5.5 miles per hour. And diesel is a much better alternative when the average speed is above 8 miles an hour. So we looked at another thing, is how long should we replace a bus? We're replacing buses on, we always shot for 12 years as the magic length you want to keep a bus, but we never could get to 12 years. So what we were looking at is, hey, maybe it pays to keep a bus 15 years. But there's a lot of unknowns. We have low-floor buses. We have no experience with low-floor buses. We have no experience with the really, really high, low emissions, high-temperature engines. So we don't believe that there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of risks. So right now we're really not at a point where we could say to you that, hey, we're going to keep a bus for 15 years. The operating costs that we would possibly incur from the 12 to 15 year mark would not warrant it. It wouldn't give you the savings. But as we have more and more experience with low floor buses, we're going to be able to make that judgment as time goes on. We'll be able to say, okay, here's the best way to do it. This bus operates in this duty cycle, and it's really efficient to keep it X amount of years. But we need more experience to determine that. Another major procurement strategy that we got from looking at what is the best way to purchase. We talked about it today. What's the best bus to purchase? Is it a bus with lifts or a bus with ramps? Low-floor buses with ramps are much, much cheaper to operate than buses with lifts. We have doubled the preventive maintenance schedule on buses with ramps. Ramps is much less moving parts. They're much cheaper to operate. You don't have to. The dwell time is much less at a stop when you're picking up a customer. So definitely ramps are a savings. They definitely help us out. Another thing is we looked at replacing on high volume routes using articulating buses to replace regular buses on a 4-for-5 ratio. And by having diverse types of fuel, by having CNG in some areas where we already have the big infrastructure investment, it really pays for us. Just to show you a CNG bus, a new CNG bus in Long Island, for example, the bus that it's replacing has a 30% better fuel economy than the bus it's currently replacing, which is really phenomenal. It's really working out. Another thing, CNG prices are the lowest they've been in years. So right now, it's actually cheaper to operate a CNG bus than it is to operate a diesel bus. And we have 6 locations across the whole MTA that have CNG fuel stations. Okay, another thing we're doing is we're testing. As most of you know, we've had the bus out here before. We have the Nova. We're testing different manufacturers and different bus models. Up until this year, we had no competition for an articulated bus. Now we just introduced the Nova low-floor articulated bus. We received 51 buses already. The bus is being operated on 1st and 2nd Avenue. It's on SBS up in the Bronx. This is going to give us competition to New Flyer. And also the bus majority of it is assembled in the state of New York, up in Plattsburgh, New York. The frame comes in from Canada, and the bus is assembled in upstate New York. Another bus we're looking at is the design line bus. Even though it's behind in its delivery, that bus has all the things it doesn't have is why we like that bus. It doesn't have oil, so you don't even have to have oil tanks in the ground. It doesn't have a starter. It doesn't have a radiator. It doesn't have transmissions. Those are my biggest operating costs. Changing those items on a day-to-day basis, operating a depot, nothing hits you more than a bus that this bus needs a transmission. That bus doesn't have a transmission. This bus needs a starter. It's our biggest roll calls. Starters, transmissions, radiators. The bus has none of these. We're also working on looking at some other different type of series and parallel hybrid drive systems. And we're looking at, like I said before, purchasing clean diesels this year, getting a test fleet of clean diesels. We've been working, excuse me? The double-decker, we could not get the manufacturer to agree to build the bus or assemble the bus even in the United States. So that's really what hurt us on the double-decker. So, of course, all our new bus procurements meet or exceed the current environmental regulations. And if you look at the chart here, the new buses that are scheduled to come in through this capital program, the buses that they replace, even though they're very clean, you won't see a bus in the city of New York that puffs any kind of emissions. Just doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't happen anymore. But the buses they replace through the life of this program is equivalent of taking 6,700 vehicles off the road. So we also have reduced the capital program by $294 million by result of some Arctic bus conversions, some service reductions, and the elimination of some annual growth assumptions. But by including diesel and CNG buses as part of our mix, we want to have a varied mix because it helps us out. We can save an additional $149 million by converting routes to Arctics. By using like I mentioned before, by using ramps instead of lifts, will save us $33 million by converting those routes over in maintenance costs.
Before, there was some resistance to having CNG depots in various neighborhoods because of the possibility of an explosion or what have you. Has that lessened over time, or are you just not telling people, or?
We have
The latter definitely.
We have 6 locations that have CNG. The buses, you could virtually, there's a film, I think that TSA or someone put it out. I'm not really sure what government agency put it out. It could take a bullet into the tank and it doesn't rupture. The tanks are very well made. They have a 15-year life. There's sensors all over the vehicle. If there's any type of gas loss at all, it automatically shuts the vehicle down. So,
When you gave a presentation a while back that CNG was considered an interim technology and it wouldn't pay to invest heavily in those vehicles because we were moving to another technology.
the problem is CNG, we already have an infrastructure investment in 6 depots. CNG is sort of like if hydrogen was ready. We have a test bus coming in, several buses coming in with hydrogen. It's really a bridge technology. It's going to bring you to the next level. All these things bring you to the next level. CNG buses burn so clean you could take your finger and wipe the inside of the tailpipe and you get no black residue on them. That's how clean they burn. But you ain't kidding, you get burned. The buses operate at such a temperature that it shortens the engine life. But they're so clean. That's why they burn so hot. That's why they're that clean.
Joe, I remember you not being wild about articulated buses. Was it just the new Flyer brand, or was it Artics in general?
Articulated buses, prior fleet is our worst performing bus that we have. The MDBF on the bus was never great to begin with, and it's anywhere from 1,200 up to 2,000 MDBF, which is really poor, considering our average is 4,000. The new bus that we're getting in is made by Nova Volvo, and we have high hopes for the bus. Let me just put it that way. There's been some initial problems. The initial bus, the first bus we used was great. Other buses come in. We've had some problems with rear doors and some fire extinguisher bottles that were put in the engine compartment and have gone off when it gets hot out. They go off because of the temperature. The vendor has relocated just about all of them. So we're starting to see the performance improve again on those vehicles. But we have high hope for them. And the articulated buses save you at the end of the day. As a 4-for-5 replacement in a garage, there's less buses. There's a 20% bus operator savings alone in the buses, more productivity with it.
I think one of the points that I would add to this is we've been talking about this. We've been trying to stay away from absolutes. We are using or we're not using CNG. We are using, we're not using articulated buses, and trying to find the places where they fit, where they're cost effective to make sense. And in a program in which you're not totally reliant on one type of bus, in which you're effectively hedging your bets. If there are some issues that come up, you're able to deal with them a little bit better. And that's one of the things that I like about what Joe's laid out, is it's something that actually tries to look at our needs, breaks it down in a somewhat different way. And I think if we're able to do that, the outcome is likely to be both efficiency in the way we run our operation, but also, as Joe articulated, a reduced capital cost. Right? That's really what we're trying to drive at here, particularly in the limited environment we have, where if we can get these newer buses in, we're really saving a lot in terms of environmental benefits.
The current program buys 2,375 buses for both New York City Transit and MTA Bus. This table shows you the bus purchases for SBS, route conversions from standard to ARTIC, and replacement of buses 12 years or older. The next chart shows you this is how we're diversified. This is where we are in 2010. 71% of our fleet are standards, as you can tell. In 2015, 63% of our fleet will be. We go up slightly in CNG. We go up in hybrids, and our regular diesel bus, plain diesel bus, goes down to 15% of our fleet. Our ticks go up, and our expresses stay basically flat. So our fleet, as Jay mentioned before, really it's diversified. It's growing more and more, and that's what we need, because we really have different duty cycles, and we serve different customers across the board. And without a question, buying new buses help our MDBF. It definitely goes up when we retire some of our buses. I mean, recently we were retiring, at the end of 2009, we were retiring buses that were close to 20 years old, and it takes a lot of money and a lot of effort to keep those buses going and on the road.
Is the reason that the graph goes down again after 2013 is that you will have gotten all your fleet and they will start to age?
I believe the MTA bus, the overage of MTA bus there, the average age of the fleet continues to grow older as this program rolls out. I think it's on the next slide, too. So our standard bus purchases will consist of hybrid clean diesel and CNGs, and diesels perform as well as hybrids on high mileage, high speed routes, and they're the cheapest bus without a doubt to buy. They're absolutely the cheapest bus to buy. We will continue to replace buses on a 12-year cycle, but as we gain more experience, we review the replacement cycle for the next 5-year program. And our clean fuel efforts and our search for new qualified manufacturers, trying to get a better price. We're going to continue this we're going to pilot 5 test fleets over the next several years. And finally, by result of buying these new buses, our emissions profile will get better and better and better. We currently have the largest fleet of hybrid buses in the world, and it's only going to get even larger.
The only thing with diesel is that we're subject to sort of the vicissitudes of the oil market,
Yes,
and that, as we know, can really pack a punch.
yes.
But with this fuel source, we are not beholden to any one vendor as we were with low sulfur diesel too.
Yes.
I know the state controller sort of took us to task for that, but there were a lot of reasons why we were stuck with that
Absolutely.
fuel source for a while.
Right, there was
But we
a-
don't have those issues with.
Yeah, and the CNG also diversifies like I said before, the price of CNG now is the lowest it's been in years, and it's actually cheaper to run than a diesel bus right now. So,
That turbo bus on 42nd
turbo
Street
bus.
that you and I rode together, how is that for cost? Because that was an amazing bus, so quiet, no jerking. I mean, none of those parts that you mentioned. I mean,
it's slightly more expensive, but if you look at the cost-benefit analysis over a 12-year cycle, it pays back itself because all the things it doesn't have. At the end of the day, your operating costs are less for a bus like that. We're having teething pains with that. That manufacturer is very slow in getting us the buses, and we can't move forward unless
too
he
bad.
gives those
It's a great
gives those
bus.
buses. The idea is fabulous. We just got to get it. It needs to mature a little bit more.
but one of the earliest things you said is that if you're going to have a bus service that's averaging 4 or 8 miles an hour, basically you're better off with a hybrid.
Yes.
And basically that's most Manhattan routes, is it not?
It's most Manhattan routes. You have the M60, the M98, different routes like that have a higher speed.
Right.
But a majority of Manhattan, even some Brooklyn routes, are very low speed. Okay, thank you.
So I think the intent here is really for us to be comfortable with the strategy, and effectively having put forth the strategy, it really becomes Joe's responsibility to work to implement this strategy in the most efficient way, but not something in which we're going back and rethinking what we're doing each time, but to give him the clarity to say, look, we're all on board. This is the way to go forward. Let's get it done. And in that way, he's in the best position to be able to do this efficiently, and he's in the best position to be able to save us money, which I think becomes one of the real questions as we look forward with tight capital budgets going forward. So that was the thought process we had there. Before we turn to the other stuff, I wanted to ask Charlie to speak for a moment about our effort in terms of some of the technology efforts we're making around buses, because it relates again to the way that we see the bus system going forward.
Thank you. We know how important customer information is. Those of you who have seen the signs, the next train signs in the subway stations, will appreciate what a difference that makes to our customers. And clearly our bus customers are no less important, and over a number of years we've made efforts to provide next bus information. Currently there is a very satisfactory trial taking place on 34th Street at a number of stations, and that trial is now, or that pilot is in its final stages. In addition, earlier this year we issued a request for information that allowed us to understand better which parties in the industry might be interested in equipping our fleet with the technology required to provide next bus information. And also we were interested in finding out what the level of compatibility was among the offerings of various suppliers. Next slide. To some extent, that request for information was issued in light of a number of concerns that we have about technology projects in general, and this one in particular. First, will we really be able to afford, given the nature of our capital program and our financial circumstances more generally, a complete customer information system, or do we need to take a more phased approach to this? Number two, we have a history of taking much too long to deploy technologies, in some cases amounts of time that exceed the, in some sense, the life cycle of the technology itself. Third, we have a fair amount of experience with sole source situations which limit our flexibility to change as technology changes or to make decisions that allow us to upgrade or expand on systems. Also, in a similar vein, there is incompatibility among proprietary systems that may result in making an initial decision to start something and then finding that one's only choice is to continue to roll that out across the entire system, and in a way that may not be cost effective given the market power that the initial supplier has. And then finally, this is something that we're paying a lot of attention to on a number of projects. In this area in particular, but it's not unique to this area, we do have a fair amount of experience with being less than completely successful in delivering technology projects, and we want to make sure that that is not duplicated in this specific area.
Other than that, we're doing really well.
Yes, other than that, we're doing other than those concerns, there's no problem. So our preferred approach, and one that we've been looking at internally and with our technical advisors, is to try to adopt a system that's built on open standards for messages among the system elements. In other words, using well-defined standards or ones in which we hold the intellectual property, and therefore allowing us to define for a multitude of suppliers how they will have to interact if they're going to sell us equipment in this area. We've also discovered that the equipment that we need for both locating the bus and communicating information from the bus has a lot of overlap with the equipment that we're using for our fare system pilot. And so there may be some opportunity to deliver two systems for the price of one. And we certainly found in preparing for the fare pilot that the installation of the systems that are needed for that have been very quick, usually taking a few hours, not days or weeks. We also want to put ourselves in a position, given the constraints both capitally and more generally, to allow ourselves to implement those parts of the system that may have the most immediate benefit to our customers at a much reduced price, while not precluding our upgrading later with new features as new buses come in and as new technologies become available. And one way of doing that is also by adhering to open standards. We build on a lot of the interest that the app community now has in working with us, and we can make data available to them through these standards that will allow us not to be the sole developer or the sole determiner of how information is used, whether that's our schedule information, our bus route information, or the location of buses. And then finally, rather than relying on bus stop signs or on information in the buses, we are going to try to rely in the first instance on the internet and mobile phones as the destinations for the information that's being produced either by us or by apps as a way of driving down the price and driving up the availability of the information. And this to some extent builds on work that's been done very successfully in Massachusetts, where as soon as Massachusetts made available the bus location information about its buses, there was a flourishing of applications developed by those people who were interested in knowing where their buses were or knowing other things about buses. So the benefits for us will include lower capital costs because effectively we will be implementing things that have a commodity price, not systems that are based on strictly transit industry quantities and developments. Second, we will have developed a suitable platform for adding features that we know about now, but also features that we may not have yet been able to anticipate, whether that's new developments in mobile phones or GPS technology or whatever. By being standards-based, we will future-proof some of these developments. We won't be coming back to you in a few years and talking about the obsolescence of the system that has taken us 4 years, 5 years, 6 years to install. And then finally, we will be making ourselves available to a dedicated and somewhat rabid community of developers who have a real interest in not only technology, but a real interest in New York City's transit system. So Where does that leave us now? We have already issued an RFP to have some open source software developed. That RFP will be awarded next month and will be coming to this board. We will be purchasing roughly 40 standard units, which will include wireless modems and dead reckoning capability, as well as, incidentally, contactless fare payment capability. And that equipment will be completely compatible with the second phase fare pilot, which we are now doing on the Lexington Avenue line and intersecting bus routes, as well as on PATH and New Jersey Transit. That will be starting before too long. We will evaluate the results of that pilot during the second half of 2010, very quickly finalize a concept of operations and a procurement strategy, and we would intend to begin rolling out the results of that in 2011 with the idea that for a fraction of the price and in a fraction of the time that a much larger, much more expensive project would take, that we would have equipped the whole bus fleet with location and next bus information in a time frame that will be quite short. So that's the end. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
After listening to all that, am I to assume that the issue of the cell phone and apps, which go together, distinguishes the bus information system from the subway information system, which which relies on the signs at each subway station? Is that the difference here?
Not completely, because well, there is a difference.
There's no, from what you said,
yeah.
there's no intent to have a sign, an electric sign at the bus stop that says next bus 2 minutes.
There is
like there is at the subway to have a sign at the subway that says next subway 2 minutes.
There is an interest in having those signs at bus stops, but it's
Okay.
worth noting, first of all, that there are only about 2,000 bus shelters in the entire city.
Right.
Out of 18,000 bus stops, and therefore we want to have a solution that is going to be available for all
Right.
the stops.
Right, okay.
Second, there are commercial issues since we do not control the space at the bus stops.
I think what you're hearing is something that is both pragmatic, given
Right.
the circumstances that are there, and I think, very much, looks to say, given the advances in technology that have taken place since this project was really set out any number of years ago, how do we actually take advantage of the fact that most people, virtually everyone, is carrying a form of a sign in their pocket?
Right.
And if we can use that, we will have overcome a big obstacle to being able to get this information out there. But I think the other point that Charlie makes about this, is that, none of this precludes other, continuing to
Right, I
see this
understand.
evolve, which is, I think, important here.
Yeah, I think the other point that's worth noting is that while there is infrastructure in each subway station that allows us to display that information, there also is an interest, and there is some work being done to display the same kinds of information on the internet or via mobile phone, so that people can have that information places other than the subway stations themselves.
So that because that was the point I was going to try to ask. So the person, assuming this works, which is an assumption, we'll make an assumption it works, the person sitting in their living room can check their mobile phone and know that the bus will be there in 5 minutes. That's the goal.
Yes.
Correct.
And walk downstairs in 5 minutes to get on the bus.
Correct.
They can't do that yet in the subway because the only way they could find that out in the subway is to actually be in the station. But the goal would be to do it that way.
Not necessarily.
Okay,
There-
that's the question.
We deliberately did the presentation this way because we want to tee up the next presentation, which is the status on where we're at with communications projects
Okay.
in New York City Transit. But the questions you're raising are ones that we have asked ourselves. There are commonalities between what is being done on the bus side that we want to mirror and do on the subway side. Certainly, we want to stay confined to those core competencies which are ours and turn over to others core competency which are theirs.
Right.
So the maximum degree we can turn over apps developments to other people and provide them source data, the better off we'll be. Point number one. Point number two, for those portions of the subway system that are open to the outside air, open cuts, elevated structures, you can use some of the same communication mediums that the buses use in terms of cell phones, internet. You can't do that in the subway as easily. So you have to do different things to be able to accommodate for that transmission medium. The other issue that works against you, but we'll sort it out, is a bus life is about 12 years. A rail car life now, we're getting 40 years. And there's no doubt about it, you can retrofit communication systems on cars, but the difficulty there is the systems engineering and the interface. But there are things you can do. So we want to provide as open an architecture as possible for that to happen. In a presentation that Mark Beanstalk's going to give you, we'll try to walk through some of the lessons learned to try to incorporate some of the features that Charlie's talking about in terms of how we want to look at things differently. Because we're putting in a Sonnet system that by the time it gets in is basically, from a state-of-the-art standpoint, old news. The fastest moving state-of-the-art in technology is communications. Right. It turns about every 7 years. And that's problematic for us. It's also problematic for us that it's hard for us to develop a relationship with somebody on the technical side, the hardware side. Yes, we're a big client, but in terms of where their profit margin is, to be able to provide communication in the subway is not translatable someplace else in terms of what they have to overcome. Probably the next step we're going to have to take to provide open architecture, we have to replace the antenna system in the subway, and we need to look at what are the best technological ways of doing that. Right now, we've got an antenna that runs the length of the subway and is hung on the wall, but when we did some of the initial studies for communication-based train control, we had thought we would have to replace in kind. But I think what we found is, with the installation of whip antennas at different places in the subway, the propagation rates of the communication media were much better than we expected. So, and we have to replace that antenna system sometime in the next 10 or 15 years. But the principles and concepts that Charlie's talking about, we want to maximize, with the one limiting factor is the subway environment is the most difficult environment to be able to have communication media.
Okay. Because to some degree, this entire discussion relates also to the commuter railroads, okay, in giving somebody the ability to know whether their mode of transportation is coming before they go to where the mode of transportation is supposed to be. Well, that's the intent.
Well, on the A division, we'll be able to do that with ATS because we will have that real-time information as to where trains are, and we'll be able to tell people probably easier outside the system than we can tell them inside the system, with the exception of the A division with the signs that are up on their app.
But I think Mitch's point is incredibly well taken, because the reality is that communication is the platform for the next big change in the way that people are able to interface with the transit system. And we need to move away from the view that we're controlling that information in ways that we've done that before, and move it into a space in which people can be finding this out from their living room and thinking of things in other ways and really changing that, right? Much less important to know what the schedule for the bus is than to know the bus is coming in 5 minutes, right? And I think that's the key that we really need to get to in doing this. Could not agree more.
Because the intent is for people to know whether to go there to meet what they expect to be there when they get there.
Yeah,
and we don't want people, it's bad enough people have to stand on the subway to wait for the subway to come even though they know it's coming. We'd much prefer they not be there until the subway actually gets there, or the bus, or the rail car, or wherever we happen to be using at the moment.
By the way, I've had this discussion in a number of places where I've tried to point out that some of these technologies have enormous benefit in low-density areas.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the matter is, there's a bus coming down Madison Avenue every 3 minutes, and as Tom's pointed out any number of times, whether that bus is on schedule or late is less important than there's a bus coming every 3 minutes, right, in doing that. But you go out, and if we're talking about, what's going on in Nassau County, for example, where you have a half an hour headway that may be between buses, and now you don't want to just know the theoretical basis. You want to know really when that bus is going to be there.
Right.
Very important late at night, where you don't want to be standing on a bus. So these really free us in ways that are very, very powerful. The constraining element of this, by the way, in systems that did this before, was they ended up effectively doing business cases that said the only way you could justify doing this is in your high density areas. Right, and it was almost backwards because you basically were counting a lot of people benefiting. You say, gee, I'll do it in the high density areas.
Right.
We now have the benefit with the things that you're talking about, Tom's talking about, Charles, to actually change that calculation.
Yeah.
And that's part of what makes it really, really powerful.
Okay.
And I think that's, it follows like that for parts of Brooklyn and Queens. It follows like that for Staten Island. It follows like that for Long Island. It's a hugely powerful application if we can get there to be able to do it.
Yeah.
In thinking about that. And it doesn't have to be 100%. Remember, 90% of that application, if we can get the information to people,
Yeah.
will be worth a heck of a lot more than 0% of it waiting for many years to get
Because
there.
so far we've been relying on people being at the station to get the information. What we want to do is get them the information way before they ever get to the station, whatever they happen to be wanting to use.
Or be able to tell them that the east side is out, go to the west side if you
Right.
want to take the west side service.
Right.
To get
Right.
downtown. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Or to say to me, don't go to Deer Park at the moment because whatever, go someplace else because then the train is on time and it's there. It's the same. It's the same aspect, but what you don't want to do is make me go to Deer Park first. That's the worst thing you could ever do because I'm not going anyplace else after that. Or the next person to walk down the street to the bus. I'm already frustrated. You better get it to me by now. Right. I agree. Okay.
Technically, we have that. I mean, if you have a PDA or anything else, you have the ability right now to go on MTA's website and get a status report of what's running and what's not running. So we
This
sort
is
of
just
have a
being
lot of
more
that
real
right
time,
now.
that's
Right. Only within the last few months have we been able to do that, and that's been a big change. This actually takes it a whole step further than that, which I think is great. I think if you wouldn't mind, I think I would turn to Mark right now. I mean, I think you gave him the segue into that already, Tom. I would let Mark do his presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Beansback. I'm the Program Manager for Communications and CPM at New York City Transit. Today I'll be updating you on the settlement agreement signed with Siemens Transit Technologies in December, which we briefed you on late last year, as well as the status of the communications network, the PACIS Public Address Customer Information Screen System for the Subway's A Division, and the upcoming project to replace the Subway's VHF radio system. I'll be also highlighting the new way we are implementing technology projects using the systems engineering approach and methodology. New York City Transit and Siemens entered into a comprehensive settlement agreement in December 2009, which resolved several claims and counterclaims on the initial phase of the communications network and the PACIS projects. The settlement prescribed an expedited network testing and acceptance program and included upgrades of certain key network elements in order to facilitate ongoing manufacturer support of the network. New project substantial completion dates were also established for both the SONET ATM and the PACIS projects. The SONET ATM project is implementing the first phase of the new communications network. The SONET portion of the network is in beneficial use, and 23 out of 25 passenger station ATM branch loops have been placed in service in the Subway's A Division. The project is on target to reach substantial completion in August of this year. The ATM-B project will complete the deployment of the communications network on the Subway's B Division. 1/4 of the passenger station ATM branch loops are ready for testing, and testing will be commencing shortly. The network management system is 75% tested and accepted. We continue to address space and environmental issues in communications rooms through several concurrent projects which are underway or planned for the next capital program. The project is on target to meet the risk-informed completion date of December 2011. The PACIS project is moving along and as of the end of April has placed 27 stations in service. To date, over 30 stations are currently in service. These stations, all in the Subway's A Division, have signs which display train arrival times as well as other customer service information. We are on target to place 75 stations in service before the end of the year.
Mark, just a quick question. Does that system have the ability to distinguish between a train that's in service and a train that's not when it says the next train is so-and-so?
Yes, it does.
Great, thanks.
The VHF radio project was advertised and proposals were received a few months ago. A detailed technical review was conducted and New York City Transit is negotiating this procurement. I can't say anything else about this project currently because of the current procurement status. Now I'll turn to the lessons learned in systems engineering approach. And I'd like to just first begin with a definition of what is system engineering. This is from INCOSE. New York City Transit is adopting a systems engineering approach in our technology systems projects. Systems engineering is an interdisciplinary approach to enable the realization of successful systems. It focuses on defining customer needs and required functionality early in the development cycle, documenting project requirements, and then proceeding through design, implementation, and system validation while considering the complete problem. System engineering also considers both the business and technical needs of all customers with the goal of providing a quality product that meets the user's needs. Systems engineering provides a number of benefits to project delivery. Summarizing just a few of the key benefits which are listed here, project quality is improved through increased system planning and definition. Risk is reduced through increased stakeholder involvement. Better participation of stakeholders through the use of standardized processes, and we'll go through those in a moment. And improved transition to operations through better documentation and training. The V model shown here is the standard model and process used in systems engineering. The model illustrates some key system principles about the relationship of the early phases of development to the end results of the project. And those phases, the key phases, are circled in red there. The concept of operations is used for documenting systems operation from the user's perspective. It's one of the first documents written that describes how the system is supposed to operate. User requirements are established very early in the design process and validated toward the end of the system delivery. System requirements are derived from user requirements and verified as you move up the V. The reason this is called a V model is, as you see on the left side on phase 0, you begin with planning and you move along to the right and then down the V through your concept of operations and requirements definition, each time breaking things down into smaller and smaller pieces. Then you've got your system down at the bottom, and as you move up the right side of the V, you are conducting testing and verification of the components that relate back to the pieces that on the left side of the V until you finally reach the top where you're dealing with the entire system. And you then validate the entire system to make sure it meets the user requirements. Then you transition to operations and maintenance. Obviously, through the life of any system, there'll be changes and upgrades as new requirements come into play and new business practices are put in place. And finally, you have to plan for retirement and replacement. Our new technology projects are being planned and designed based on system engineering principles. The new bus radio project, which is included in the 2010 to 14 program, and the smart card projects have concepts of operations describing what the system is supposed to do from the user's perspective. Detailed test and acceptance criteria are included in the VHF radio contract mentioned earlier. These test and acceptance criteria eliminate uncertainty and risk and inform the proposers exactly what must be done to have the system accepted. We're reducing the scale and scope of projects so that the project life cycle does not exceed the technology life cycle. You heard that earlier from Tom and also, I believe, from Charlie. We're looking to establish ongoing relationships with vendors through smaller annual procurements rather than one big contract. Most electronics vendors deal with customers who come back every year or every 2 years with a fairly steady level of investment of purchase of equipment and purchase of services. We tend to do things in a big bang approach. We come once and we buy $20 million of equipment and we say, see you in 15 or 20 years. And for the final 10 years of that 15 or 20 years, there's no ongoing relationship with the vendor. And we need to change that in order to stay current, both within the technology life cycle and also in the support life cycle of the equipment. And finally, we're piloting solutions to deliver systems in a faster time frame. You heard about some of the bus customer information system pilots. We have piloted a train arrival display system on 6 stations on the B division on the A and C line using existing signal circuits and in existing PACIS systems that are installed in those stations many years ago. We're looking to conduct another pilot to provide additional train arrival information on the Flushing line. These pilots are all done using in-house engineering, technical, and construction resources. So not only are we looking to do things faster, smaller, we're also looking to do them using our in-house expertise. We have a lot of knowledge, we have more knowledge and more expertise in a lot of these areas than the contracting community has.
Will we get an update on that B division pilot as to how accurate it is compared to what's being rolled out on the A division and how much cheaper it is and how easy it is to install? Because since that's gone in, I mean, I've gone to see it, and I think some others have, but we really don't have a status report on it. Because that's very promising if it works.
We can do it at the committee level or here, and we'll do it not only in terms of the pilot, but the idea is to roll it out by the fall for the entire line, right? Or the line down to 23rd Street.
Right. The pilot on the Flushing will provide more information than what you've seen there. What you've seen on the A line and the C line is essentially a train is arriving on the local express track, because that system uses the existing signal circuits to detect the presence of a train, and that signal system cannot detect train identification. On the Flushing line, we're doing something similar using the Signals PLC that was installed in the Master Tower at 111th Street. And by doing a little bit of in-house work, coding software work on that PLC, we can actually identify a train and let people know, for example, on the 7 line, whether it's an express or local train. And then that can be rolled out as well to other places on the B division, where we have installed PLCs and upgraded master towers. Right.
So then by what you just said, Mark, the system that's in 6 stations on the B division cannot distinguish between a work train and a passenger train.
That system cannot. That's correct. That's right. That's why we're trying to build, as you saw some earlier as well, what we can do immediately to get a basic level of information out there without precluding the upgrades to provide better information as we move forward, because we felt, and Jay has pushed us in this direction very strongly, it's better to start with something basic, get good information out there, and then build on it as you get more experience and more knowledge.
I have to tell you, I went out with the team, I don't know, 2 weeks ago today, something like that. I think it was early morning, and just went to look at this in practice up at the northern Manhattan stations. And it was frankly hugely satisfying. I mean, we had really taken technology that had been there and are using it in a much more effective way. You could see people responding to it. So yes, it wasn't 100%, but frankly, most people who were standing at that platform didn't really care which train was coming. They cared to know there was a train coming, the express track or the local track to do it.
That's at the entrance as opposed to on the...
No, that was on the platform.
On the platform as
that was
well.
on the platform. And then you stood at 145th Street and you watched, I don't know if you've ever seen this, the line of people on the staircase who are all waiting to know whether the rumble is going to come first on the lower level or the upper level, and they can dash one way or another, right? And we potentially have the opportunity with the work that's been done in house to take that away, right? And it was hugely satisfying to see it and to see some of the stuff happening. And I'm conscious of not overcommitting to some of this, because I think we're still finding our way step by step. We'll make some mistakes, but I think we should all feel actually very proud of our in-house forces who have really risen to the occasion on doing this and are finding ways to make this happen. It's really, really terrific.
Andrew, on lines where you have a single service on a track, the basic level of information is a train is arriving on that track. If there is an out-of-service train, a work train or a non-revenue train, we do rely on the dedicated announcers who control that line to make that announcement that would then say the train arriving or passing through on the local track is in, please step back from the platform. So that's how we handle that exception right now. Right. So in summary, we're implementing a system engineering approach to delivering technology projects which meet our user requirements, incorporate lessons learned from projects across CPM, provide operational benefits to both subways and buses, and will improve the customer experience.
Questions? As I said, I think there's no question that technology has been a troubling area for the MTA. I mean, absolutely no question about it. We're not shying away from that. I think what you're actually hearing through all of the discussion that's taken place is a very thoughtful, pragmatic approach to being able to do it, a recognition that we don't have to have one solution, and in many ways we're better off not to have one solution, and also the realization, which it's taken us a while to come to, that the way that we get a lot of things done in our organization, which is progressively designing it and moving it forward and doing other things like that, just doesn't fit with the path of technology that changes so rapidly that we can't keep up with it. Now, there's still a lot of work to be done, and I'm not taking anything away from it, but I think we should feel we're in a much better place than we were even a little while ago. And again, I think it really is a credit to quite a number of people across the organization, both on on the subway side and the bus side who are working real hard to find solutions to this stuff right now. Knock on wood, we'll keep coming forward with successes, but I think we're poised to be able to do that right now. What am I supposed to do next?
For any comments.
Okay, independent engineer for any comments. I'm almost in danger of finishing on time, which I've never done before.
Well, I don't want to do anything to derail that. How much time do I have? Okay, just a couple of comments on the projects that were just briefed, the ATMB and the PACIS, two projects that now that have gone past the settlement stage and are continuing to completion. We're taking a look at schedule and budget performance for the remaining work, and both projects are tracking to complete on the new contract completion dates. But careful management is required on the budget side, and here's why. The ATMB project has about 15 months remaining, not a short period of time to complete the work. About 88% of the work is complete, but 99% of the third-party contingency has been expended. And there's a high likelihood, just based on that alone, of running short in that particular category. And on the in-house cost side, which is very critical to the completion of these projects, 69% of those in-house costs have been expended, and that's actually tracking well as of today. However, the last 3 quarters, the rate of expenditure has been such that if it continues that way, they'll go over budget. And that's why I say careful management will be required in order to keep that project within budget. And the same is true for PACIS. 10 months remaining, 65% of the work is done, 67% of the third-party contingency is expended, so that's fine. But right now, 99% of the in-house costs have been expended. So again, something for New York City Transit to look at very carefully. And one more comment on the lessons learned. There's been discussion about new approaches to executing technology-driven projects, which is, in fact, very necessary. But there is one thing, somewhat old school, that is going to need to improve, and that is the ability to accept and close out projects in a more timely manner. The lack of timely project completion puts contractors in a position uncertain as to the extent of the duration and when they'll be able to redeploy resources. Will hedge the risks by increasing their bids. Additionally, projects that don't go through the acceptance and contract closeout in a timely manner will also experience increases on the in-house costs as well. So it's not a high-tech problem, but it's one that is all tied in. And regardless of how you execute a technology project, they need to do a better job in accepting and closing out these projects. Mr. Chairman, that's my comments for today.
Which brings me to the question of whether there's any other business before we adjourn. And if not, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.